as McKenna mentioned, it is kind of early this morning, so you're getting credits hopefully for your time. I'm going to give you a little bit of time back probably because it's not going to take an entire hour. But since it's early and I'm supposed to have an icebreaker, right, I figured I'd tell you a little bit of a joke. It's a little bit about me though, and as you can tell by my name with the last name like Keister, I probably have lots of jokes, right? First day of college, I'm sitting in the back of the class, unlike you guys who are sitting kind of toward the middle and front. And as they went around and did the roll, they said, hey, if you go by any other name other than what I holler out, just let me know and I'll write it down. My parents played a terrible trick on me and named me James Eric Keister. So everybody always reads my first name, but I go by my middle name. So when she gets to me, she actually pronounced it correctly. She said Keister, which is a rarity. Most people say Kester, Keister, Kessler, or they add letters in, anything to not say Keister. But she gets to me and she says James Keister, so I holler out Eric. And from the back of the room to the front of the room, I guess it didn't come across real well. She looks back down at her list, she looks back up at me and she says, you've got to be kidding me. I said, what? She said, who in their right mind names their kid Harry Keister? Honest, true story. So I was Harry in that class for the rest of the year, and that's as much of a joke as you'll probably get out of me. Thank you for being here this morning. I am with Textron and Pace Technology. We're going to talk about what we do on our Cushman products and other products in the class today. Been with Textron for about 22 years, so I've almost got it figured out at this point. Worked with different parts of the company for a long time. I'm going to go through a little bit about who Textron is, what we do, as well as we get into this process. How many in here utilize some type of fleet management type of system on their vehicles or equipment? Anybody? Okay, all right, awesome. So, what can you learn today, hopefully, in this session? How can I use technology and be remote? You know, we're all being asked to do more with less nowadays, and some of you have large facilities, you got a lot of people, you got a lot of equipment, and you need to be able to monitor that, manage that, if you will. So first thing I want to try to touch on is going to be at improving your asset management. So if you have vehicles, you have equipment, you're trying to take care of them, maintain them, if you will, can technology help you do that? It absolutely can. Optimizing labor. Again, early on, when I first started with Textron, I worked for Jacobson, and I sold equipment to a lot of municipalities. And again, if you put a group of people out there and you're putting them on mowers and you're sending them all over these big cities and you have no earthly idea where they are or what they're doing, you're just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping stuff's getting done. We have the ability to help you with that now using technology. And lastly, we want to talk about safety and service. Again, being asked to do more with less, if you will, but also you've got to be able to do it safely. Your employees need to be safe. The people that they're working around need to be safe. The equipment, if there's safety involved there, you're going to have less downtime, less damages, things of that nature as well. So we want to touch on all three of these throughout the presentation and show you what we're doing in this space. And then we're also located in booth 1207 downstairs, so if you end up coming down there and you have more questions after we're all done, by all means, come see us. So a little bit about Textron. Has anybody in the room even heard of Textron before? No, okay, that's not abnormal, and that's kind of why I wanted to cover it. Textron is a multi-industry company. It's about a $14 billion company. So again, Fortune 500 have been basically the top 250 ever since I've been part of the company. 35,000 employees all over the world. The names and logos across the bottom, a couple of them might be more familiar to you, especially ones on the left-hand side. So Bell helicopters, people probably heard of, and then Cessna and Beechcraft, that makes up our aviation division. So a lot of people have heard of those. I work for Textron Specialized Vehicles, which we'll go through here in just a second, kind of what that is, and there's going to be some more names within that you've probably heard of. Caltex builds fuel delivery systems for high-end vehicles. Textron Systems builds a lot of stuff for the government, whether that be ship to shore and a whole bunch of stuff that I can't tell you about, or you know what would happen, I'd have to kill you. And then True builds simulation equipment. So those people who need to learn how to fly airplanes or helicopters, True builds the simulators that help you do that. And if you've never done one of those, I highly recommend it. They're really fun because you can wreck and not blow up. So Textron Specialized Vehicles, which is who I work for, these are some brands that you've probably heard of and you may even have at your facilities. So Cushman and an E-Z-Go are both built in Augusta, Georgia. That's who I have worked for the last 23 years or so. I did start out working for Jacobson. They're built over in Europe, in Ipswich. Some of the fun stuff, Arctic Cat and Tracker, I don't get to do that. And then Textron GSE, which is Tug and some other ground support equipment companies that, again, you might be familiar with if you fly and what have you. So we're going to talk about how we're trying to implement fleet management, tracking software, things of that nature to help in a lot of these different areas. Okay? So, again, early in the morning, got a head scratcher for you. Okay? For all of you who are managers in the room, okay? How can you be in multiple places at one time? When they gave me this job 6 years ago, they said you're the national sales manager for this product. That's a big territory, and I've struggled with how to be in more places at one time, if at all possible. And this is something I think, again, a lot of us have. We have large facilities, we have a lot of people, we have a lot of equipment, and we're trying to manage that, if you will. So being in more than one place at one time is very difficult unless you work there and you're really, really flexible. So what we want to try to do is give you technology to help you be in more than one place at a time, okay? How many of you have ever heard the term the Internet of Things? Yeah, okay, good. So I think it's pretty obvious what it is, okay? So everything is becoming connected nowadays. And again, this is what we're going to hopefully be able to show and utilize to help you manage those big properties, large amount of people, large amount of equipment, okay? I wanted to cover how GPS software works and hardware works. So I'm going to show you a couple things real quick. So we have a screenless unit, which is what most people in here are probably familiar with. Gets buried in the dash or someplace on a vehicle, okay? Ties into the power system from anything 12 volts and up. We build a lot of electric equipment nowadays. Lithium is taking over a lot of what we do in the smaller vehicle space. And again, we've got some of those downstairs that we can show you as well. But we also have screened units. So again, most of us have vehicles nowadays that have screens in them. So we have a 7-inch screen and a 10-inch screen. For the most part, a lot of these are being utilized in facilities where they have customers that are going to be driving some of the vehicles, not necessarily employees. That doesn't mean that you can't put them out there for employees on employee vehicles as well. The idea behind it, it's a little bit like Google Maps. It's driving around, it's showing you a map of the facility so that somebody can know where they are at that period of time. You can also send messages, weather alerts, things like that. They can see restricted areas on the map, which is kind of nice. They're not flying blind out there, not knowing where they're supposed to go and not supposed to go based on the map. Again, a lot of this is utilized more for non-employees, guests, customers, rentals, if you will, but it can be used for employees. We've got a hospital down in Memphis, I think, that's just putting about 50 of these on, a fleet of their vehicles for just their employees. But I wanted to cover how this works because a lot of people don't necessarily understand exactly how this technology works within their vehicles. It's a daisy chain approach. So first and foremost, you've got the satellites. The satellites are talking to the actual piece of equipment. I don't know if most people know this or not, but if you get your phone out and you type in your address for wherever you live and you route that with Apple Maps or Google Maps, and once you load that, you could literally turn your cellular service off, your Wi-Fi off, have no communication except that GPS, and it'll take you home. Because once it's connected and it knows what you're doing, that connection still works. You don't necessarily have to be connected to the cellular network or a Wi-Fi network to have the GPS component working, because the satellite is telling the piece of equipment where it is. What's on the piece of equipment, one of these items here, is going to record that information and ultimately get to a place of communication, whether it be Wi-Fi or cellular, and download that information. So again, first step in the daisy chain is satellites are telling the piece of equipment where it is. okay? What it's doing, how fast it's going, and it's recording all of that. The next step in the daisy chain is that communication network, okay? And with, of course, cellular technology and how it's exploded, it's allowed this type of technology to proliferate in great ways. We purchased this company about 6 years ago as part of Textron Specialized Vehicles, and the first thing we did is we kind of attacked the golf market, because GPS screens on golf cars have been around for a long time. And that was our lowest hanging fruit. We went out there, went after it, and now we're seeing 50+% of the people buying golf car fleets are putting GPS on them in one way, shape, or form. So this communication network, again, has brought the cost levels down through cellular technology. What happens is the cellular component now just moves that information from the vehicle to the internet, okay, or to a server, and then from there it comes to you and you can manipulate, understand. You can even go backwards now and send information back through, okay, to the piece of equipment if you need to, okay? So, first point we want to cover is, can technology help you improve your asset management? Real-time locations, again, so a couple people have jumped in since then. We've got one person at least that has a telematics system. Anybody else that's come in later have a telematics system on any of their equipment? Okay, perfect. So the ability to see where folks are, where your equipment is in real time is a great benefit to most of the people. I'll go through some stats and stuff here near the end. Live trail history, so I can see where they are, but I can also see how they got there. I can see how fast they were going. It drops basically breadcrumbs all over the place and says, here's where they were, and here's when they were there. We can see full traffic maps, so you could look and see all of your vehicles all at one time and every place that they have gone throughout the day. So again, just understanding trails, where people are going, how they're getting there, if there's more efficient ways of doing that, if there's safer ways of doing that, etc. Electric battery levels, again, sustainability is a big deal in most people's operations nowadays, and we're moving away from some of the gas-powered equipment and more toward electric equipment. What's interesting about that is that in a gas scenario is, if I walk in the morning and I've got to take this vehicle out, and there's no gasoline, and it's not a big deal. I just fill it up with gasoline and I drive off. An electric vehicle is a little different. It takes time to charge that, and you can't necessarily always just look at it and know how much is in there. This gives you the ability remotely to look at a fleet of vehicles and understand what's the charge level in those vehicles. Are they ready to work or not? Is this going to get somebody to where they're working and then stop or strand them somewhere in between? So again, being able to see the state of charge of those electric vehicles remotely is a huge help. Off-hours control features, meaning you can say when you're closed down and all these pieces of equipment are in, they stay in, okay? Using geofences to keep things where they're supposed to be and not outside of where they're supposed to be in the off hours is another huge benefit to a system like this. Everybody know what geofences are? Okay, so just, they're virtual fences. It's like you don't see the lines, you don't see the stakes, you don't see the ropes, but they're there, and they will help keep vehicles where they are supposed to be or keep them out of places that they're not supposed to be, depending upon how you set it up. Being able to add notes to vehicles. Again, if we are trying to maintain property and maintain equipment, being able to add those notes and follow up on that. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the safety portion of it. Usage reporting and hours and miles. Again, this goes back to how am I going to maintain that equipment? Am I going to be able to keep it at a level that it's supposed to be at, make sure that it's not breaking down, make sure that I'm not overutilizing certain pieces of equipment and underutilizing other pieces of equipment. We're obviously in the business of selling equipment, so it would seem like I'd want you to buy as much as humanly possible, but the reality is you have a limited amount of budget to spend excuse me, on equipment. So you should right-size that so that you can get the most out of your budget, and this should help you do that. And the ability to put this on non-easy-go or Textron equipment is also something we've kept at the forefront of what we've thought about, because we know that you're not going to have every piece of equipment that you use coming from us. So again, anything that's 12-volt battery and above, you can utilize this kind of equipment on. Next would be labor. So first part was all about equipment. Next part is about your people. Knowing who is on what vehicle again, is a really neat part of this. You can add names to the system and see who's on what type of vehicle. The screenless version actually has the ability to work and incorporate an RFID badge. So again, if people are utilizing RFID on any of their employee badges, things of that nature, you can actually set it up to where somebody's got to swipe that to unlock that vehicle to allow them to use it. And then of course, at that point, you know who's on that vehicle. So another really neat thing. The screens have a similar scenario, but it's a Bluetooth badge that they use. So again, it would tell you who's on that particular piece of equipment at that time. And it would also keep other people, if you had it designated to where that's the only person that can utilize that with a screen with the Bluetooth badge, now nobody else can come and take their vehicle. Again, that may not happen at your facilities, but it does happen. Activity work zones is another interesting feature here. So we use geofencing to say in certain areas, and I'm going to use mowing as an example of that. If you have an area where you have to mow grass and you say, hey, here's a field, I'm going to cover that field with a geofence that says this is a work zone. It should take somebody 32 minutes roughly to mow this particular area. It will track when that piece of equipment gets in that area, how long it's in that area, when it leaves. Again, as a manager, you can now say, okay, this particular person does this job in 30 minutes, and this particular person's taken 40 minutes to do it. What's going on? How can I implement some training? How can I help get more productivity out of the people and out of my equipment while they're out there? So again, being able to put in those activity work zones to help understand what time is idle, what time is moving, what time is working, and be able to just understand that. Again, remotely is really important. You don't have to physically be on site to see it. And then geofence alerts via email. The pedal start type vehicles that we build predominantly through Cushman, and then a lot of our competitors build, those we can actually disable when they go into areas they're not supposed to be in. But there's a lot of equipment you're not going to want to disable when they go someplace they're not supposed to be. But you do want to know, as a manager, when people are going places that they're not supposed to go. So we have the ability to do that with those geofences and email alerts and what have you. So again, when people go someplace, you'll know that they went there via an email, if you will. Next, safety. So from a safety perspective, you want to make sure that your equipment is staying where it's supposed to be. You're trying to reduce accidents by controlling people's driving patterns. It's proven that if you can keep people where they're supposed to be and out of those dangerous areas, you're going to help maintain their safety along with the safety of your equipment. Being able to reduce other expenses with this. Again, anybody who's ever had car insurance and they ask you a bunch of questions. Does your car have airbags? Does your car have anti-theft on it? Things like that. That helps reduce your insurance bill. Well, when you can put equipment, technology like this on your equipment, you should be able to go back to an insurance company and say, listen, I've created areas where people should not go, can't go. I can control that. I can manage that, if you will, which should reduce any damages to equipment that might be insurance related or possibly damage to people, which is also going to be an insurance issue. So you have the ability to help control some other expenses outside of just your fleet with software like this. Keeping drivers obviously from going where they shouldn't go and reporting on their behavior is important. Next would be service. Better understanding the usage of the fleet, right-sizing that fleet, again, making sure that you're not buying too much equipment. We just delivered a bunch of vehicles for an event that they're having, and this is the first time that we've actually got this software on our rental fleet because they've always been renting hundreds and hundreds of vehicles for this event, and now what's neat is we trained them how to use this software, and they're going to look at it and realize we probably don't need nearly as many pieces of equipment for this event as we thought we did. So again, it may seem counterintuitive for us as a company that builds equipment to tell you, hey, by the way, you don't need as much equipment, but we feel like that's the role we should serve here and help being a good partner to say, hey, you can right-size your fleet by understanding its usage. Fault codes, so this is something that we're moving toward in all of our equipment, especially the electric equipment, because electric equipment has a controller in it that's got brains and it throws off fault codes, much like your automobiles do. And we're starting to read those fault codes. We're getting that remote. We're giving some warning to saying, hey, here's issues that may be happening with a particular piece of equipment. The other thing that's neat, we're about to launch in July, is a fleet manager's tool that is going to take, eventually, at least once you get enough information in it, it's like a data lake, if you will, that says these particular things happen to this particular type of piece of equipment at this much usage levels. Okay, so now if you're trying to maintain, again, a fleet, you can say, hey, based on usage, I've got a few things I might need to go ahead and have in stock when it comes to parts and things like that, because now you're able to keep that piece of equipment up and running, reduce any downtime and what have you, because again, we can kind of get to the point where we start to predict what may or may not happen based on this data lake of information. Okay? So here's some of why, again, I think we only had one person raise their hand that they've got telematics that they're utilizing, but here's some interesting information. So 32% of GPS fleet management users reported an ROI in less than 6 months. Okay, there's all kinds of data analytics and fleet management systems out there. There's some that are really inexpensive, some that are more expensive. They have all different kinds of feature sets in them. But again, a lot of people are seeing that in less than 6 months. 64% of fleet managers are currently using GPS. So again, this is something where technology has really changed our industries, I think, and we're starting to see this as a much more accepted piece of a way of doing business. 42% reported considerably fewer safety incidences. Again, this is going back and looking at what am I doing as far as behavior goes? How can I maintain my equipment? How can I keep people from doing things they shouldn't be doing on pieces of equipment? And it's really changed the safety side of the equation. 52% saw improvements in their customer service because of fleet tracking. Again, knowing if a vehicle's got enough charge to actually do what it's supposed to do, whether you're doing that with your employees or you're doing that with customers, it's an important piece of that. 50% reported that they've implemented a new GPS fleet solution just within the last few years. Again, it's something that's definitely coming on more recently, and 89% of fleet professionals said they choose GPS tracking software based on the ease of use. This is where the back end side of the software, whenever you look at whatever it is you may end up looking at, look at the back end side of the software. In other words, what do I look at? Okay, it's one thing that what goes on the piece of equipment and does it work and does it do what I need it to do, but what are you going to be interfacing with each and every day? How easy is it for others to interface with that exact same software? That intuitiveness of the software is a big deal, because the more intuitive it is, the easier it is for people to grasp and understand, and the more likely they are to utilize it. Okay, so definitely whenever you get into this, look at that back end software and try to understand, is this something that makes a lot of sense?
Quick question.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I would say that, so again, worked for the company that I work for the last 22 years. I would say it was probably about 15 years ago, we got stuff put on our trucks. And again, for somebody who's been doing the job for 8 or 10 years, I felt the same way at the time, saying, I've already been doing this job for a long time. I've been doing it fairly well. Now all of a sudden you need to be able to see where I am and what I'm doing and how fast I'm driving and so on and so forth. And there was a bit of that frustration. I think we're starting to get beyond some of that. Again, everybody's starting to recognize that they're being tracked, they're being listened to in almost everything that they're doing anyway. So we're seeing a lot less of that, I guess is what I'm saying. 15 years ago, it was definitely a huge pushback. Today, not so much. When we drive down the highway, most of the time you see stuff on the back of trucks, and it says, hey, basically this vehicle's being monitored, and it's becoming more and more normalized. For sure. For sure. And again, it goes back to just trying to get them to understand the why behind it, I think is very important. It's more about me trying to make sure that you're safe, the equipment is safe, we're utilizing it properly necessarily than it is for me micromanaging every single thing you do. Again, a lot of people, their workforces are being reduced a little bit. They're finding it harder to hire people and make sure that they're actually getting as much out of them as they possibly can, and this is just there to help try to facilitate that.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Because I got a little, at the end, I was definitely going to open it up if there's any other questions for sure. So doing more with less, again, the three different ideas that we're trying to talk about here: improving asset management, right-sizing it, and keeping them where they're supposed to be. Again, geofencing, there's work zone style geofencing that we talked about, trying to track work within a certain region. There are keep in, what we call keep in style geofences, which are pretty obvious. I need to keep all of these pieces of equipment within this area. There are keep out, where I'm trying to keep people out of those areas. And then if you utilize screens, you also have message style fences that you can put up. So if they go into a certain area, you can put up a message style fence. You can even put up a speed enforcement fence, which this one's not in that area right now, but it would literally populate a speed limit right down here in the bottom. If speed is a concern for you in that particular area, you can set that up to make sure that they're hopefully driving the right speed if you're concerned about that. Again, just utilizing it to improve your assets. Labor optimization, again, hiring and training good people and holding on to them is hard. And being able to come alongside and help move somebody from maybe, hey, I've just learned how to do this job, to becoming proficient at it, and being able to use technology to say, hey, here's some places and ways in which you can get better, is important. I did, as an anecdotal kind of a story, I did a completely not related to this team training thing one time where we got to be a pit crew. I don't know if there's any NASCAR or racing fans in the room, but there was a crew of 6 or 8 of us, and you're set to go out and take off tires. You got to fill gas. You got to tear off the windshield stuff. You got to do all this, and they tell you that a world-class pit crew can do it in just over 15 seconds. About 17 seconds is kind of the norm. So we went out and did it, and we did it in a minute and a half. And what was neat about it, though, is they were just using camera technology above us, and afterwards we went back in and they said, okay, so here's a lot of your wasted movements. Here's what you're doing. It's not so much that you have to move faster, you just have to move more efficiently at what you do. Okay, so we went back out the next time and of course moved from a minute and a half down to about 45 seconds, and we went back in again, watched the video, more wasted movements, and we got it down to where we were in that 35 seconds by the time we were done. Obviously we're nowhere near a world-class pit crew, but what it was is just the ability to take technology from a bird's eye view and show people, hey, here's a lot of wasted time, here's a lot of wasted movements, here's some better ways of doing it to just get your job done more efficiently. Can be more along the lines of what might help them to understand the why you're putting it in, not so, hey, I'm just trying to micromanage every move you make. Okay. Last would be safety and service. It's just a bunch of reduces here. If I'm trying to reduce damage to my equipment or damage to my property, if I'm trying to reduce downtime, injury, vehicle loss, and wasted time, these are things that you can definitely do when you add technology to your vehicles and to your fleets. And again, you should be able to get some residual effect, savings effect when it comes to insurance, things of that nature. Obviously, you spend less money on repairing your equipment, and maybe even spend less money on equipment in general because you realize I've got 4 or 5 too many pieces of equipment than I actually need. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you can do that will help, again, get you the ROI for this type of equipment. Okay, for those of you who came in late, we have a booth downstairs, 1207. When you first walk in, it's got Cushman equipment in it. For any of you who are wondering, how do I get in touch with people? We've got different regions set up within the country for Cushman. We have 5 different regions for our sales folks, and then we have that broken up into 4 different regions for what we call vertical market managers. These guys work as a team together, okay? So there's a group of, I think it's 11 or 12 folks total that work together to cover these areas. And here are their contact information. So if you're looking for folks, we can definitely get you in touch with people that are going to be able to help you with equipment and also help you with this part, the technology side of the equation. But are there any questions? And for those of you who came in late, if you did have anything that you wanted me to go back through, I'd be more than happy to do that. But are there any questions that anybody has regarding technology, fleet management, or their facilities in general?